that started now. And I will share my screen. We will get into it. John, can you see my screen, see the slides?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for taking some time out of your Friday to learn a little bit more about this funding and advising opportunity. I'm Andrew Rockway. I am a community manager with the American Press Institute's Trusted Elections Network, along with my colleague, John Hernandez, who is also on the call. Just to start, we want to say a big thank you to Craig Newmark Philanthropies, who has supported the Trusted Elections Network throughout the year and is responsible for support for this funding opportunity. So just a bit of background, the Trusted Elections Network is helping news organizations address misinformation and center voter information needs this year. So the ways that we do that, we have the network itself includes more than 230 local journalists, as well as folks with expertise in electoral administration, election law, and mis and disinformation. And we see ourselves as bridging the gap between.
You're gonna check that out.
John, can you keep folks on mute? I'm sorry. Bridging the gap between folks with expertise in those areas, as well as journalists who, as you all well know, are strapped for resources this year, are overworked, and may not be able to dig into a 50-page report from the post office, or may not be seeing the latest research on vote by mail trends in their state. And so we try to help summarize those things, bridge that gap, and provide other information and resources to journalists that are on this beat this year. So getting into this funding opportunity, we've been working with local journalists now on the elections beat for since early March, even before things took on a whole new level of wildness because of the pandemic. And we've really seen kind of two things emerge. And most of these things are not new, but the pandemic has exacerbated these things. So two of the issues that we've seen in conversation with the reporters in our network, as well as audience members and other experts, is that there's a higher level of confusion this year about the process of voting. That includes not just voting by mail, but also, where are my polling places this year? Polling places have closed. How do I understand how to register in the midst of a pandemic if I can't do it at the DMV or things like that? So we understand there's a high level of confusion and uncertainty because so much has been in flux because of the pandemic, and also just the overall process of the election. So how do we know that mail ballots are secure? How do we know our cybersecurity infrastructure is secure? These sort of kind of basic premises of our electoral system, there's just confusion about. There's always been confusion about these things, but that's heightened this year. And one of the focuses of this funding opportunity is to promote greater understanding of the process of voting and the process of running elections at the local level. The second focus is addressing mis and disinformation at the local level. We oftentimes we can tend to focus on sort of the national issues that we see trending on Facebook or Twitter, but we've also seen over the course of the pandemic, in particular, a lot of misinformation that's targeted at local groups and is potentially less visible on those social media platforms, whether it's coming from text or it's in closed chat groups like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. And so we also want to support projects this year and offer advising that look at sort of the local trends in mis and disinformation, engaging audiences to understand what those issues are, and provide information that counters or addresses some of the false claims that folks may be seeing at the local level about elections this year. And so the ways that we want to do that is providing either micro grants, and we're offering those grants in the range of $2,000 to $10,000 in really special circumstances, or if you're working as part of a collaboration with multiple newsrooms, we may consider larger proposals, but your best shot is within that range. And then we also want to offer expert advising. So if you have a project or an idea or a coverage plan that you want to do, but maybe you're not quite sure how to accomplish it, or you need a little bit of outside help. This is something that the American Press Institute has done for a number of years across a number of different projects. And we want to connect you with that expertise to take your project to the next level. And these types of support are not mutually exclusive. You can apply for both a grant and advising. Really, we want to help newsrooms that are resource strapped this year execute on their visions in support of their audiences in the ways that they want to, and leverage our knowledge and expertise, and in this case, monetary resources to support those efforts. Just quickly, the things that we're thinking about as we look at proposals. Obviously, we want to see an impact on the two focuses that I talked about previously. We also want to see that, is this project or is this idea relevant and applicable to other news outlets and other geographies, or is it just something that's tailored really in a specific and niche way to your local context? That's not to say we won't support the latter niche projects, but a better chance if things can be broadly applicable across the industry. Obviously, the election is right around the corner. Mail ballots go out today in North Carolina, and we'll see that soon in other states as well. So we really want a project that you can get up and running quickly and is feasible within the time frame. On the application website, we want all projects done by the end of November. We know that there will be some post-election concerns potentially, whether that's waiting for votes to be counted with the increase in mail ballots or other things. So projects can certainly include that post-election period, but we do want things that can be accomplished quickly and in the time frame of the election. And then we also want to support a variety of different news outlets, whether that's broadcast or print or digital, but also in different regions of the country, focused on different audiences, understanding that the information needs of audiences can vary quite widely based on where you are and based on your connection to the newsroom. So we want to focus on really kind of a breadth of newsrooms and breadth of news organizations that are working on these issues. So that's really our quick summary of it. Just as a heads up, the deadline to apply is Monday, September 14th, end of day, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So we know it's a tight turnaround, but also the election is right around the corner. So we do want to get those projects in quickly, and we are evaluating them on a rolling basis. And we'll, if a project can get started within the next week and it's a really strong candidate, we want to support that. So there's no benefit to waiting for the deadline. It's better to get your project in quickly. And if we have questions, we will follow up. Or if you have questions for us, we will respond to those things quickly. So better to submit something or send us an email about an idea that you're considering rather than holding off and trying to polish the perfect proposal, because we really do want to work with you to create the best idea and the best project that you can and that your newsroom can execute on. So with that, if you do have questions for either me or my colleague, you can reach out to either of us. Our emails are here. But with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we can jump right into the Q&A. I know there's probably a lot. We went through that quickly, but really wanted to leave a lot of time for the question and answer. And if you want, you can drop that in the chat, or I will change the security settings and folks can unmute themselves if you want to do it that way as well. So I see one question. Would API support an event like a candidate forum? Potentially. It depends on how is that candidate forum? How are you looking at the impact of that? Are you reaching audiences? Is it something that potentially is a bit unique or creative in terms of its execution, such that folks can learn from the work that you're doing? But we are really open to a lot of different project types. Another question coming in: turnaround for acceptances within a few days. It can be. We really want to get these things out quickly. So I can't guarantee you that the turnaround will be a few days necessarily from when you submit to when you hear back from us. But we really do want to get things out quickly. Another question, is this open to for-profit newsrooms? Yes, yeah. There are specific tax implications that we would have to work out with your specific newsroom. And my colleague, Kevin, who is on the conversation, can maybe say a little bit more in the chat, or if he wants to jump in here. But yeah, we do want to support for-profit newsrooms, nonprofit newsrooms that focus on on local audiences. Just running through these. Would these grants support a collaboration between two stations? For example, with our local bilingual station to get election information translated into Spanish? Absolutely, we support collaboration. So if that's the route that you want to take, that would be great. Can you give some examples of what API has given grants for? So this is a good question, because API, traditionally, we are not a funder, and traditionally and currently, we are not a funder for journalists or otherwise. We are a nonprofit. We receive funding from foundations and others to provide resources, knowledge, training to local newsrooms. That we are in a unique situation this year where, frankly, because of the pandemic, we had money that we were not spending otherwise for in-person events and other things like that. And so we had the opportunity then to move some of this funding to support all of you, and we decided to do that. But in terms of a general idea, we've seen really successful projects that provide information to voters via text message, or look at. We've seen collaborations that ask audiences directly. What kinds of misinformation or false information are you seeing? What questions do you have about some of this information? That really has uncovered sort of narratives in the context that I'm thinking about the pandemic that we would not have seen otherwise, because they're not trending on social media. They're closed in these sort of WhatsApp groups or otherwise. And so those types of engagement efforts to understand, what questions your audience has, what the information needs of your audiences are, is really important. And things that we tend to look at, but also if there's a different way of presenting content, that could be a unique voter guide or election guide, basically anything that is addressing those two focus areas, but has something that maybe offers a learning opportunity for other newsrooms, are the types of things that we're looking to support. Amara asks, how does the requested amount affect decision making? Are we more likely to get approved if we request less, etc.? No, basically anything within that range is treated equally in that sense. We don't necessarily have a minimum or a maximum number of projects that we're looking to fund. We really want to fund projects that are going to have an impact, are interesting, present learning opportunities for the field as a whole, but we don't have a minimum or a maximum number that we're looking for. So within that range, or if you have a special project in mind, we want to support projects that allow and provide funding that allow you to do the project that you envision, not what you think we will fund because it's cheapest. Amar also asks, will for-profit newsrooms need a fiscal sponsor? Traditionally, and Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there are some opportunities that we can provide funding to for-profit newsrooms in sort of a Report for America style model. I know they've done similar things. So I don't think you'll need a fiscal sponsor, but there may be some logistics there that, Kevin, if you want to jump in and respond to, you might have a better understanding of that than me.
Hey, yeah. I would just say, if you have specific questions about the for-profit question, you can just email me. I just put my email address in the dialogue. This is something we can do. We can't provide direct guidance on everything, but we can send you a bit more information and try to include more in the follow-up here as well. One additional note is that the expert advisor option, if you pursue that route, where you could have someone help you, for like a good chunk strategize or put together a project, that would not include money changing hands. So that's just something that's open to for-profits and nonprofits, and I think is also just worth noting as you consider this.
Thanks, Kevin. How specific do we need to be with project submissions? We've got a few broad topics we want to dig into, but don't have a complete roadmap on how to get there. That's fine. If you have a general sketch, let us know, and we can follow up and quickly work with you to say what's the best idea out of this. How could with your resources and some additional resources get this done? But yeah, you don't necessarily have to have a turnkey project ready to go. Even though the timeline is tight, we do want to support you in getting something up and running if it's an interesting project. So you don't have to be have all the details set. We want to work with you on that.
I would say beyond that, like, you don't have to be specific, but be realistic on the timeline front, and then consider impact as well. We're obviously looking for impactful projects, so if that's something to keep in mind with what we can do in the next 8 weeks or so, that would be impactful as well. We can figure out those specifics later, but those constraints are real.
And I think that's a good point, John. And I think just on another note on impact, a likely impact for $3,000 and $5,000 in 6 weeks is not every person in our city is going to be informed on the election, and we're going to track down these things. If you can show a clear impact within a niche of your community or audience, that's much more interesting and important to us than having large numbers and the breadth of the impact in that sense. So if you can show a clear impact rather than we've reached everybody in our town, that's more important to us and frankly more likely. Are you giving preference to project requests that include advisory support from API? No, and we envision that the advisory support would not necessarily be American Press Institute staff, although it could be, but we have folks with expertises in audience engagement, election administration, voting by mail, those sort of technical pieces, content strategy, product development, within our broader network. That if you have a need, we're going to find somebody that can respond to that need, who is not necessarily affiliated in any traditional sense with API. And so there's no preference to can we work with John? That you certainly could, but that wouldn't necessarily give preference. How will the size of the newsroom impact your decision to fund? We want to focus on a variety of types of newsrooms, but if you have a project in mind that you can execute given the size of your newsroom and reflects the capacity and resources of your newsroom, that's what's important to us, rather than larger newsrooms may be able to have a larger impact because they can devote larger resources to a project like this. That's great. And we want to support those, but those aren't the only things that we want to support. Can you speak more to the ability to train other newsrooms? What about work with training J-School or future journalists? It's a reasonable question. If there are J students that are working on election projects in some capacity with their student newsroom or as a class at university, potentially there are opportunities there to support, but we really, this is a sort of time-limited project in the sense of building understanding of the election process this year. And so certainly projects are open to student journalists and student newsrooms, but we want to focus on sort of impact this year rather than the training aspect of things or the learning benefits down the road, which are certainly important, but just kind of outside the scope of this opportunity. Does the API grant support a multimedia election project The New York Amsterdam News is both print and digital. Of course, yeah, absolutely. However you push out information, whatever your platforms you use, that's great. You know, we want to have the impact with your platform and your format. So all types of media, multimedia, print, digital, social media, you know, however you're communicating with audiences, that's great, and that's what we want to support. If we apply for both funding and advice, will each of those asks be considered separately? Are you interested in supporting election coverage through data and maps? We could consider them separately. I think, you know, if you apply and there's an aspect of a project that we like, or think that, you know, maybe this didn't make it to the cut to get funding, but we do want to offer you advising, or vice versa, but probably the former in that case. We would follow up individually and say, hey, we can offer this advice and support, but we can't offer financial support. So they're not necessarily considered of a pair. And if there's an option in the application to know if there's anything else to add, could be a good idea just to say, you know, we're open to considering funding or advising, rather than just these have to come as a pair. And then on the second part, supporting election coverage through data and maps. If that's the way that you can have a reach and impact with your audience, that's great. You know, we're not being prescriptive about the ways that you reach your audience or others in your community. So if data and maps are the way to do that, then we can support that. Do the projects need to address both points in your focus, or one or the other? Just they can address both. They can address one. If you have another focus that you think is really critical to the election that we're missing, you know, we want to hear that. But those are the two that we've identified, you know, through working on this for the past 7 months. But you don't have to focus on both. You can just focus on one. Although they are, I would argue, connected in many ways. Folks' lack of understanding about the voting process helps misinformation spread. But if they're separate, that's fine too. We have an elections project underway that could be significantly enhanced and become more impactful with funding from this grant. In other words, we're limited by our current budget. Can our application discuss what we're working on and how additional funding would be applied to enhance the project and increase impact? Of course, yeah. If it's an existing project and things are already underway, in some cases, we're not necessarily going to give preference to that, but if that can help you get up and running quickly and have an impact quickly, those are all good things. So yes, we can support projects that are already going if you just need, you know, X amount of money to get this person on board or pay for this tool or whatever the case may be. So yeah, absolutely, we want to support that. Is there anything in the chat? I know I went through that very quickly. Anything that other questions that are jumping up, or folks want to you know, jump in with a specific question? If you do want like specific feedback on your submission or your project, send us an email. If you have a question about a project submission that is generally applicable, you can ask it here, but we don't really have the time or capacity right now to give you specific project feedback, although we do want to do that via email. But other questions? Oh, somebody asked, I came a little late. Can you review the two things you were looking for? Yes. So the two focuses that we're focused on are the information needs of voters. So information about the process of voting, information about the election process overall, so that folks feel confident casting their ballot this year, know how to cast their ballot, feel that the system is, you know, is understand how the system works in terms of the back end of election administration, but have that sort of 360 view of, you know, how to vote, how people tally votes, those sorts of things. And then the second focus is on local mis and disinformation. So what sort of information related to the election are and voting are folks seeing at the local level? What confusion, what false information? Yeah. Could this be something as simple as a voter's guide in both English and Spanish that was a pullout section in our newspaper? It could be that simple, although there may be questions about whether that's a simple thing or not. I will say, we do want to see not just like, oh, we've translated this material, but do we have a plan actually to reach the audience that speaks that language and would benefit from this information? So, we've seen projects in the past where things get translated, but to never reach the community that they're translated for. And so that's the thing. That's the next step that we want to see is, yes, we want this information available in additional languages. That's super critical this year. But we also want to see a plan or partners or process that information is going to get out there in a reasonable way. John, could you drop our emails again? They get lost in the chat. And we'll follow up after this conversation as well with an email to everybody that registered. That includes the link again, our contact information, and some of these kind of FAQs. But yes, please reach out via email if you have a specific question or want feedback on a specific thing. What about projects that are already underway but not funded to completion? Again, yeah, absolutely. If the resources that we can provide can support a project that's already underway, increase your impact, see the things that we want to see happen, then absolutely, yeah, we're willing to support that. We get that November 3rd is right around the corner, so if you have something already underway, and that is a good thing, that you've been thinking about this and that you can get things going quickly.
Did you see the email or the question from Sarah? Would you be supportive of a PSA campaign for getting out the vote, like early voting starts X through X, registration info here? I mean, to me, that's, yeah, that sounds great. That's something that we've been focusing on or talking about when we refer to voter information needs. Obviously there'd be more details to that project, but yeah, that's the sort of information that I think logistically people are going to need this year, and part of the reason why we're focusing on that aspect of that. So yeah, depending on the details, that sounds like it could be a potential good application.
Yeah, we have no problem with the quote unquote basics here. The basics are the information that people need. There's research from Pew that says more than half of the population feels they're going to have problems voting, are confused about voting this year. So just providing that basic information in ways that is reaching different people is a good project in our mind, because it's such a critical need this year. And John, would you mind in the chat dropping a link to the article that you wrote recently about voter information needs and possible solutions that might prompt some ideas for folks as they're thinking about a plan? Other questions, other comments, other thoughts from anybody? We're willing to stay on. I know it's 11:30 Central where we are, but if folks want to hop off, but we're going to stay on for at least another half hour as long as folks here have questions or ideas or comments that they want to share. And I encourage you.
I was going to say something real quick before people head out or if people leave. This is not meant to be limiting either. And the thing about it is, if you identify something that is important to your newsroom or something that is important to your community, like, please feel free to apply and be creative in that sense. We're kind of trying to keep that broad as well, because this is a super complicated situation, and the playbook hasn't been written for voting during the pandemic and everything else that's going on. So don't let that stop you either, and feel free, especially if there's anything else we need to know section, feel free to include other things that may be impacting your decision making or would impact your application or how you proceed in it going forward.
And I would highly encourage you to read the article that John put into the chat on voter information needs. I think it has a lot of good information and resources about how to reach different audiences and what information needs we're seeing this year. We'll upload the recording to YouTube after this call, and then we will send it out to folks and put it on the website as well, so you can have that for posterity and your review as you're putting together a proposal.
Great.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, any other questions? Any other comments? Anything exciting
That was
happening
really
with
helpful.
these labs?
Yeah.
Great. Glad to hear that, Marsha.
Yeah, glad we could help. And the PDF was Kevin's idea, so thank you, Kevin, on that front.
Great. Well, it looks like folks are taking off. Any last questions or any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now, or send us an email anytime. Do we expect to run out of funds before the deadline date? Really to be seen. We just put this out this week, and we certainly at this point haven't received applications that total the amount of funding that we expect to give out. So I can't answer that definitively. We may, but we also may not. So I'm sorry that I can't be a little bit more clear about that. The total that we have to distribute. Sorry, John, you had something else?
Oh, no, go ahead. The total we have to distribute is we're thinking around $110,000. But that being said, part of the reason why we made this a rolling deadline is because we know how journalists work, and we know that you guys like to submit your applications in right before the deadline. And we hope not to see that happen this time around because of the sense of urgency. Like I said, we have about 2 months to make something happen with these funds. And so we'd like to get started sooner rather than later if possible. So realistically, if you're ready with an idea, feel free to submit that application sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. Sooner is better.